Dr. Clara Gallagher's hands trembled as she read the urgent telegram that had just arrived at her small medical practice in Madisonville, Missouri, the paper worn thin from her repeated readings as she tried to comprehend what it meant for her future. It was the autumn of 1878, and while women doctors were still few and far between in the American frontier, Clara had fought tooth and nail to establish herself in this quiet town, never expecting that a mysterious epidemic at a distant cattle ranch would upend everything she'd worked for. Doctor urgently needed at Silvercreek Ranch. Unknown illness spreading among workers. Will pay handsomely. Send reply if accepting. Samuel Steele. Clara tucked a wayward strand of auburn hair behind her ear and stared out the window at Madisonville's main street. She'd been in town barely a year, having graduated from the Woman's Medical College of Pennsylvania with high honors before making the arduous journey westward to establish her practice. Many locals still viewed her with suspicion. A female doctor was considered unnatural by most, but she'd slowly earned a measure of respect through sheer determination and skill. "You're not seriously considering this, are you?" Martha, her middle-aged receptionist and only staff member, peered over Clara's shoulder at the telegram. "I have to," Clara replied, already mentally cataloging what supplies she would need. "There's an epidemic, Martha. People are dying. Silvercreek Ranch is nearly a week's journey from here," Martha protested. "And Samuel Steele has a reputation. They call him the Silver Wolf of the territory. Ruthless in business, keeps to himself. Some say he's killed men." Clara squared her shoulders. "All the more reason those workers need medical attention from someone who took an oath to do no harm." She had heard stories of Samuel Steele, of course, a formidable rancher who had carved his empire out of the wilderness through sheer force of will. But rumors and reputations meant little to her compared to human suffering. Within 24 hours, Clara had packed her medical bag, several trunks of supplies, and sent a return telegram accepting the position. By dawn the next morning, she was boarding the westbound train, the first leg of her journey to Silvercreek Ranch. The train ride took her through increasingly rugged terrain, the familiar rolling hills of Missouri giving way to the wilder landscapes as they ventured farther west. Clara spent the time reviewing her medical texts, particularly those dealing with infectious diseases. Without knowing what she was facing, she needed to be prepared for anything from typhoid to influenza to tuberculosis. After 2 days on the train, she disembarked at a small station that seemed to consist of little more than a wooden platform and a telegraph office. A tall man with a weather-beaten face approached her. "Dr. Gallagher." His voice was gruff, his eyes assessing her with undisguised skepticism. "Yes," Clara responded firmly, extending her hand. "And you are?" "Emmett Jones, ranch foreman at Silvercreek." He ignored her outstretched hand. "Mr. Steele sent me to collect you. The wagon's this way." Clara dropped her hand, refusing to show her disappointment at the less than warm welcome. "I've brought medical supplies. They'll need to be loaded carefully." Emmett grunted in response but did call over 2 young men to help with her trunks. The wagon was sturdy but basic, clearly designed for function rather than comfort. Clara climbed up to the bench seat, arranging her skirts as best she could while Emmett secured her belongings. "It's a full day's ride to the ranch," he informed her as he took the reins. "Rough country." "I'm prepared for that," Clara assured him, though in truth, the thought of spending an entire day on the hard bench seat of a wagon was daunting. As they left the small settlement behind, Clara tried to engage Emmett in conversation, hoping to learn more about the situation at the ranch. "How many people have fallen ill?" she asked. 15 so far," Emmett replied, eyes fixed on the road ahead. 3 dead already." Clara felt a chill despite the autumn sunshine. "What are their symptoms?" "Fever, coughing. Some get spots on their skin. They go quick once the coughing starts bringing up blood." The description alarmed her. It sounded potentially like a severe form of pneumonia, possibly even tuberculosis, though the skin manifestations were concerning. And Mr. Steele? Has he been exposed? Something like respect flickered in Emmett's eyes. Boss won't leave the ranch while his men are dying. He's the one nursing them as best he can. Hasn't slept in days, I reckon. That wasn't the picture of the cold-hearted rancher Clara had been led to expect, and she filed this information away thoughtfully. The journey was indeed arduous. The wagon jolted over every rut and stone in the increasingly primitive road. By mid-afternoon, they had left any semblance of a road behind and were following what Emmett called a trail, but looked to Clara like mere suggestions in the landscape. The scenery, however, was breathtaking, vast open plains giving way to rolling hills dotted with pine and aspen, the latter blazing gold in their autumn glory. As the sun began its descent behind distant mountains, Clara caught her first glimpse of Silvercreek Ranch. It was larger than she had expected, with a substantial main house built of solid timber, several outbuildings, and corrals containing horses and cattle. A stream, presumably Silvercreek itself, wound through the property, glinting in the late afternoon light. "It's beautiful," she remarked almost to herself. "Best grazing land in the territory," Emmett replied with a note of pride. "Boss built it all from nothing in 10 years. As they approached, a tall figure emerged from the main house and strode toward the wagon. Even at a distance, there was something commanding about his presence, something that made Clara sit up straighter and tuck that troublesome strand of hair behind her ear again. Samuel Steele was not what she had expected. She had imagined someone older, harder looking, perhaps with the florid complexion of a man who enjoyed his whiskey. Instead, the man who stood waiting was perhaps in his early 30s, tall and broad-shouldered with a lean strength about him. His face was indeed weathered from outdoor life, but it was a handsome face, strong jaw, straight nose, and eyes that even in the fading light Clara could see were an unusual shade of gray-blue, like storm clouds gathering on the horizon. "You must be Dr. Gallagher." His voice was deep and resonant, his expression intense but not unwelcoming. He reached up to help her down from the wagon, strong hands gripping her waist and lifting her effortlessly to the ground. "I am," Clara confirmed, suddenly very aware of her wrinkled travel clothes and disheveled appearance after the long journey. "And you're Mr. Steele." "Samuel," he corrected, releasing her quickly, but not before she noticed the rough calluses on his hands, the hands of a man who worked alongside his men rather than merely directing them. "Thank you for coming. The situation has worsened since I sent the telegram." "I'll need to see the patients immediately," Clara said, her professional demeanor reasserting itself. "And I'll require a space to set up as an infirmary. Somewhere clean, with good ventilation and access to fresh water." Something like approval flashed in Samuel's eyes. "Already prepared. We've moved the sick men to the bunkhouse and relocated the healthy ones to the barn. It's the largest space we have, with windows that can be opened. I've had it scrubbed down with lye soap." Clara nodded, impressed by his foresight. "I'll need to wash and change first. The journey was dusty, and I don't want to introduce any additional contaminants. Of course, Mrs. Fletcher, our cook and housekeeper, has prepared a room for you in the main house. She'll show you there and provide hot water." He turned to call for the housekeeper, but not before Clara noticed the deep shadows under his eyes and the slight slump to his shoulders when he thought she wasn't looking. Emmett was right, the man hadn't slept in days. Mrs. Fletcher, a plump, efficient woman with kind eyes, led Clara to a comfortable bedroom on the second floor of the main house. The room was simply but tastefully furnished, with a large bed covered in a handmade quilt, a washstand with basin and pitcher, and a sturdy wardrobe. "I'll bring up hot water, Doctor," Mrs. Fletcher said. "And some food if you're hungry." "Thank you, but the patients take priority. Just the water for washing, and I'll eat later." Clara was already unpacking her medical bag, organizing the instruments and medicines she would need first. Mrs. Fletcher returned promptly with steaming water and fresh towels. Clara washed thoroughly, changed into a clean dress, and pinned her hair securely at the nape of her neck. She took a moment to gather herself, staring at her reflection in the small mirror above the washstand. Her green eyes looked back at her, determined but apprehensive. "You can do this," she whispered to herself. Then, medical bag in hand, she headed downstairs. Samuel was waiting for her in the entranceway, a lantern in hand as twilight had fully descended. "Ready?" he asked, his eyes taking in her transformation from travel-weary passenger to confident physician. "Yes," Clara replied. "Take me to them." The bunkhouse was only a short walk from the main house, but Samuel insisted on escorting her, holding the lantern high to illuminate the path. "The ground gets treacherous after dark," he explained, "and I need to show you what we've done so far." Inside the bunkhouse, the scene that greeted Clara was grim but organized. 2 long rows of beds lined the walls, most occupied by men in various stages of illness. Lanterns hung from hooks, providing adequate light. Several large buckets of fresh water stood ready, along with clean rags for compresses. A table had been set up near the door, presumably for her use, with several bottles of what looked like home remedies arranged neatly. "How many?" Clara asked, surveying the room. 17 now," Samuel replied grimly. 2 more fell ill today. We've lost 5 altogether." Clara set her bag on the table and turned to him. "I'll need to examine each patient thoroughly. It will take time. Can you assist me?" "Of course." There was no hesitation in his response. "What do you need?" For the next several hours, Clara moved from bed to bed, examining each patient methodically. Samuel stayed by her side, helping to turn patients, fetch water, and record her observations in the notebook she had brought. The men were indeed gravely ill, with high fevers, severe coughs, and in many cases, a distinctive rash that spread across the chest and back. By the time she had examined the last patient, Clara was exhausted but had reached a preliminary conclusion. She straightened up, pressing a hand to the small of her back, which ached from bending over beds for hours. "It's typhus," she said quietly to Samuel as they stepped outside for a moment, the cool night air a relief after the stifling heat of the bunkhouse. "Not typhoid fever, but epidemic typhus. Spread by body lice. The men's bedding, clothes, everything will need to be boiled or burned. And they need to be bathed, their hair possibly shaved to eliminate the lice." Samuel absorbed this information with a grim nod. "We can do that. What else?" Clara outlined her treatment plan: cold compresses for the fevers, herbal teas to soothe the cough, proper nutrition to build strength, and most importantly, isolation of the sick to prevent further spread. "You should consider evacuating the healthy workers," she added. "Send them to town until the epidemic has passed." "Already offered," Samuel said. "They refused to go. Loyalty works both ways out here, Doctor. I won't force them to leave if they choose to stay." Clara couldn't help but be impressed by this evidence of the loyalty Samuel inspired in his men. It spoke to a character quite different from the ruthless rancher of reputation. "Then we'll need to establish strict protocols to minimize further infection," she said. "And I'll need more help. I can't care for 17 patients alone, especially if more fall ill." "You'll have whatever you need," Samuel promised, "and I'll continue to help you myself." "You need rest," Clara observed, noticing again the exhaustion evident in his face. "You won't be of use to anyone if you collapse." A ghost of a smile crossed his features. "Are you prescribing rest for me, Doctor?" "I am," Clara replied firmly. "For hours, at least. Mrs. Fletcher and I can manage until dawn." To her surprise, Samuel didn't argue. For hours, he agreed. Then I'll return. He hesitated, then added, Thank you, Dr. Gallagher, for coming, for helping my men. Clara, she said impulsively, if we're going to be working together to fight this epidemic, you should call me Clara. Their eyes met in the lantern light, an unexpected moment of connection amid the crisis. Clara, he repeated softly. Thank you. As Samuel headed toward the main house for his prescribed rest, Clara watched him go, struck by the contradictions in the man. The fearsome rancher with the gentle hands. The tough employer who nursed his sick workers. The solitary figure who inspired such loyalty. She shook her head, banishing these thoughts. She had work to do, lives to save. Whatever mysteries Samuel Steele presented would have to wait. The next few days passed in a blur of activity. Clara established a rigorous regimen of care for the sick men, with Samuel, Mrs. Fletcher, and several of the healthy ranch hands assisting on rotation. They boiled bedding and clothing, bathed patients to reduce fevers, administered herbal remedies, and ensured proper nutrition for those who could eat. Despite their efforts, they lost 2 more men, both of whom had been among the first infected and the most severely ill when Clara arrived. But the others began to show signs of improvement, and no new cases appeared, suggesting their isolation and sanitation measures were working. Clara worked herself to exhaustion each day, catching sleep in brief stretches on a cot set up in a corner of the bunkhouse. She refused to return to the comfort of the main house while her patients needed constant care. Samuel matched her dedication hour for hour, his strong hands surprisingly gentle as he helped bathe fevered brows or turn weakened men to prevent bed sores. On the 5th night, as a cold autumn rain drummed on the bunkhouse roof, Clara found herself standing shoulder to shoulder with Samuel at the treatment table, preparing willow bark tea for the fever cases. You should get some rest, he said quietly, careful not to disturb the sleeping patients. You've been up for nearly 20 hours straight. I will soon, Clara promised, measuring dried herb into a pot of hot water. Once we've finished the rounds. Samuel's hand covered hers, stilling her movements. The rounds can wait half an hour. Sit down before you fall down. Too tired to argue, Clara allowed him to guide her to a chair in the corner. He brought her a cup of coffee, real coffee, not the chicory blend she'd been making do with, and sat beside her. Tell me about yourself, he said. What brings a woman doctor all the way out to Missouri? Clara cradled the warm cup in her hands, appreciating the rich aroma. The same thing that brings anyone west, I suppose. Opportunity. Freedom. In Philadelphia, I would have been forever in the shadow of male physicians, tolerated as a curiosity at best. Here, people care more about whether you can set a broken bone or deliver a baby than about the propriety of a woman practicing medicine. It can't have been easy, Samuel observed. It wasn't, Clara admitted. My father was a doctor. He encouraged my interest in medicine from childhood. But when I told him I wanted to follow in his footsteps formally, he was horrified. He thought an interest in medical texts was a suitable hobby for a well-bred young woman. Actually practicing was another matter entirely. Yet here you are. Clara smiled faintly. Yes, here I am. My mother died when I was young. When my father passed away 5 years ago, I used my modest inheritance to attend medical school. Most of my classmates stayed in Philadelphia or went to New York or Boston. I chose to go where doctors were scarce enough that even a female one might be welcome. Madisonville is fortunate to have you. There was something in his tone that made Clara look up sharply. As opposed to Silvercreek Ranch having me? Samuel met her gaze steadily. I didn't mean it that way. I simply meant that small towns rarely attract physicians of your caliber. And how would you know my caliber, Mr. Steele? The formal address slipped out without thought. Samuel, he corrected gently. And I know because I've watched you work. You're thorough, knowledgeable, innovative when standard treatments don't suffice. You treat each man as a person, not just a collection of symptoms." He hesitated, then added, "My father was a doctor, too." This unexpected revelation startled Clara. "He was? You never mentioned that." A shadow crossed Samuel's face. "He practiced in St. Louis. Wanted me to follow in his footsteps, but I had no aptitude for it. No patience for books and studies. I wanted open skies and physical work." He stared into his own coffee cup. "He never forgave me for it." "I'm sorry," Clara said softly. "Fathers and their expectations can be complicated." Samuel shrugged. "It was a long time ago, but I recognized quality medical care from watching him. You would have impressed him." They fell silent, but it was a comfortable silence, filled with the sounds of rain on the roof and the occasional cough or murmur from a patient. Clara found herself studying Samuel's profile in the lamplight, the strong line of his jaw, now darkened with several days' worth of stubble, the furrow between his brows that seemed permanent, the surprising length of his eyelashes. "We should make those rounds," she said finally, setting down her empty cup. They moved together among the patients, checking temperatures, administering medications, adjusting blankets. Clara noticed that Samuel knew each man by name, asking specific questions about their homes, families, concerns. Another contradiction, the supposedly cold-blooded businessman who knew that Hank Anderson's youngest daughter had just lost her first tooth, or that Miguel Sanchez's mother made the best tamales in the territory. By the time they finished, dawn was breaking, gray light filtering through the windows. The rain had stopped, leaving behind a fresh, clean smell that made its way even into the bunkhouse. "You really should get some proper rest," Samuel said as they stood by the door. "Sleep in a real bed for a few hours. The crisis seems to be passing. Mrs. Fletcher will come relieve you at breakfast time." Clara was about to refuse when a wave of exhaustion hit her so powerfully that she swayed on her feet. Samuel's hand shot out to steady her, gripping her elbow. "That settles it," he said firmly. "Doctor's orders." Too tired to argue, Clara allowed him to escort her back to the main house. The early morning air was cool and damp, the ground muddy from the night's rain. Without warning, Samuel's arm went around her waist. "The path is slippery," he explained, but Clara noticed he didn't remove his arm even when they reached more solid ground. She told herself it was only because she was tired, that she was imagining the warmth that spread through her at his touch. At the house, Mrs. Fletcher was already up, the smell of baking bread filling the kitchen. She took one look at Clara and clucked her tongue. "Straight to bed with you," she declared. "I've got fresh sheets on and breakfast will keep. Go on now." Clara was too exhausted to do anything but obey, climbing the stairs with heavy steps. At her door, she turned to thank Samuel, only to find him standing much closer than she had realized. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, something unspoken passing between them. "Rest well, Clara," he said softly, and then he was gone, his footsteps receding down the hallway. Clara slept deeply and dreamlessly, waking only when late afternoon sunlight streamed through her window. She rose, washed, and changed into a fresh dress, feeling remarkably restored. When she went downstairs, the house was quiet except for sounds coming from the kitchen. Mrs. Fletcher was kneading bread dough at a large table, her capable hands working the mass with practiced ease. She looked up as Clara entered. "There you are," she said with satisfaction. "Feeling better after a proper sleep, I imagine." "Much better," Clara admitted. "Thank you. Are there any changes with the patients?" "None for the worse," Mrs. Fletcher reported. "That young Jenkins boy even managed some soup at midday. Mr. Steele says the fevers seem to be breaking in most of them." "That's excellent news," Clara said, relief washing through her. Where is Mr. Steele now? A knowing look flashed in Mrs. Fletcher's eyes, gone so quickly that Clara wondered if she had imagined it. Out checking the herd. We lost some cattle during all this, no one to properly tend them with so many hands sick. He should be back before supper. Mrs. Fletcher insisted that Clara eat something before returning to the bunkhouse, setting before her a plate of ham, fresh bread, and apple preserves that tasted like heaven after days of snatched meals. As Clara ate, Mrs. Fletcher busied herself with dinner preparations, occasionally casting glances her way. You know, the housekeeper said finally, in the 10 years I've worked for Mr. Steele, I've never seen him like this. Clara looked up from her plate. Like what? Concerned. Not just about his men, he's always looked after them well enough, but about what someone else thinks. About impressing someone. Mrs. Fletcher's hands never stopped working as she spoke. He had the entire house cleaned from top to bottom before you arrived. Ordered new linens for your room. Even brought in flowers, though I told him they'd likely wilt before you got here, with the telegram only just sent. Clara felt warmth creeping into her cheeks. I'm sure he simply wanted to provide appropriate accommodations for a physician coming to help his men. Mrs. Fletcher made a non-committal sound. If you say so, doctor. All I know is, Samuel Steele is not a man who typically frets over whether the guest room has fresh flowers. Before Clara could formulate a response, the kitchen door swung open and the subject of their conversation strode in, bringing with him the scent of horses and open air. Clara, he said, genuine pleasure lighting his face. You're looking better. How was your rest? Exactly what I needed, she replied, suddenly very aware of Mrs. Fletcher's knowing presence. I was just about to return to the bunkhouse. I'll walk with you, Samuel offered. I've just come from there, actually. The men are asking for you. They left the house together, Clara acutely conscious of the brush of Samuel's arm against hers as they walked side by side. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the ranch yard, and the air held the crisp promise of approaching winter. Mrs. Fletcher says the fevers are breaking, Clara said, steering the conversation to safer ground. Yes, in most of them. Jenkins even asked for a second helping of soup. Samuel's expression was lighter than she had yet seen it. You were right about the typhus. Your treatments are working. We were fortunate that we caught it relatively early and took aggressive measures, Clara replied. But they're not out of danger yet. Complications can still arise, especially in those weakened by prolonged fever. They had reached the bunkhouse door. Samuel paused, turning to face her fully. I know I've said this before, but thank you, not just for coming, but for how dedicated you've been. Most doctors I've known would have prescribed treatments and left the actual care to others. Most doctors you've known were men, Clara pointed out with a small smile. We women doctors tend to be more hands-on. Partially by necessity, we have to prove ourselves constantly, and partially by inclination. Many of us went into medicine precisely because we wanted to provide direct care. Samuel studied her face for a long moment. You're a remarkable woman, Clara Gallagher. Before she could respond to this unexpected compliment, he had opened the door, ushering her into the bunkhouse and the waiting patients. The next week brought steady improvement to the sick ranch hands. One by one, they began sitting up, taking solid food, and eventually moving back to their regular quarters as they recovered. By the end of the second week, only 3 men remained in the improvised infirmary, and they too were well on the way to recovery. Clara found herself with actual leisure time for the first time since her arrival. Samuel insisted she take advantage of it, offering to show her the ranch properly. They rode out together on a clear, cold morning, Clara on a gentle mare named Daisy, Samuel on his own stallion, a magnificent gray he called Thunder. The ranch covers about 20,000 acres, Samuel explained as they rode. That ridge to the north marks our boundary with the Henderson place. The creek forms the southern border, and we extend east to the Old Post Road and west to the foothills. Clara was impressed despite herself. That's an enormous property for one man to have established in just 10 years. Samuel shrugged modestly. I had advantages many don't. Education, some family money to start with. But mostly, I was willing to take risks, to go places others considered too remote or too dangerous. They rode in comfortable silence for a while, cresting a small hill that offered a panoramic view of the valley below. The landscape was magnificent rolling grasslands dotted with stands of aspen and pine, the creek winding through it all like a silver ribbon. In the distance, snow-capped mountains rose against the impossibly blue sky. It's breathtaking, Clara said softly. I can see why you chose this place. Samuel nodded, his expression softening as he surveyed his domain. I came through this valley on a cattle drive when I was 20. Knew immediately this was where I wanted to build something lasting. He turned to look at her. What about you? Is Madisonville where you plan to stay? The question took Clara by surprise. In truth, she hadn't thought much beyond establishing her practice and proving herself. I don't know, she admitted. I chose Madisonville because they needed a doctor and were willing to accept a female one, at least on a trial basis. But I haven't put down deep roots there. And would you, if the right opportunity presented itself? There was something in Samuel's tone that made Clara look at him sharply, but his expression revealed nothing. I suppose that would depend on the opportunity, she replied carefully. They continued their ride, Samuel pointing out various features of the ranch, the best grazing areas, the place where spring calves were born, the fishing hole where the men sometimes caught trout on their days off. Clara found herself genuinely interested, asking questions about cattle breeding and ranch management that seemed to surprise and please Samuel. As they returned to the ranch house in the early afternoon, Clara was more relaxed than she had been in weeks. The ride had done her good fresh air, exercise, and conversation that didn't revolve around symptoms and treatments. I should check on my remaining patients, she said as they dismounted in front of the stables. Of course, Samuel agreed. But would you join me for dinner tonight? In the dining room, not the kitchen. Mrs. Fletcher has been asking when she'll have a chance to serve a proper meal on the good china. The invitation caught Clara off guard. They had been taking meals wherever and whenever they could during the crisis, often standing up in the kitchen or sitting at a patient's bedside. The prospect of a formal dinner, just the two of them, carried implications she wasn't sure she was ready to acknowledge. That would be lovely, she heard herself saying. What time? 7 o'clock, Samuel replied, a genuine smile lighting his features in a way that transformed his entire face. I'll see you then. The remaining patients were doing well enough that Clara felt comfortable leaving them in the care of Emmett and one of the recovered hands for the evening. She returned to the main house with enough time to wash properly and change into the one dress she had brought that wasn't strictly practical, a deep green silk that complemented her eyes and hair, with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. It was hardly the height of fashion, but it was the best she had available. Clara twisted her hair into a simple but elegant knot at the nape of her neck, securing it with pins. She had no jewelry save for a small gold locket that had been her mother's, which she fastened around her neck. Looking in the mirror, she barely recognized the woman looking back at her, cheeks flushed with color, eyes bright with anticipation. This is professional courtesy, she told her reflection firmly. Appreciation for your medical services. Nothing more. The reflection didn't look convinced. At precisely 7 o'clock, Clara descended the stairs to find Samuel waiting in the entryway. He had clearly made an effort for the occasion as well, trading his usual work clothes for a crisp white shirt, dark waistcoat, and neatly pressed trousers. His hair, usually tousled by the wind, was combed back from his forehead, highlighting the strong planes of his face. "Clara," he said, a note of something like awe in his voice. "You look beautiful." "Thank you," she replied, feeling oddly shy. "You look quite handsome yourself." He offered his arm, and she took it, letting him guide her to the dining room. The table was set with fine china and crystal, a centerpiece of late autumn flowers arranged in a silver bowl, and candles providing a warm, flickering light. It was far more elegant than Clara had expected in a bachelor's ranch house. "Mrs. Fletcher has outdone herself," Samuel remarked as he held Clara's chair. The meal was indeed exceptional: roast beef with perfectly cooked vegetables, fresh bread still warm from the oven, and a bottle of good red wine that Samuel explained had been a gift from a grateful cattle buyer. They talked easily throughout dinner, the conversation flowing from medical topics to books they had both read, to childhood memories, to their respective experiences of moving west. "I still remember the first time I saw the Mississippi," Clara said, smiling at the memory. "I thought it was the ocean. I couldn't imagine any body of water being so vast. And now you've crossed it and half a continent besides," Samuel noted. "That takes courage." Clara shook her head. "Not courage so much as determination. I knew what I wanted and was willing to do what it took to achieve it." "That's the very definition of courage," Samuel insisted. "Facing the unknown because something matters enough to make the risk worthwhile." As Mrs. Fletcher cleared away the dinner plates and brought out dessert and apple pie that filled the room with the scent of cinnamon and cloves, Clara found herself studying Samuel's face in the candlelight. There was a vulnerability there that she hadn't noticed before, perhaps because he kept it carefully hidden behind his confident exterior. "What about you?" she asked. "What drove you to build all this? You mentioned your father wanted you to become a doctor. Was coming west an act of rebellion?" Samuel considered the question, turning his wine glass between his fingers. "Partly," he admitted, "but it was more than that. I wanted to create something tangible, something I could point to and say, 'I built that.' Medicine never called to me the way it clearly calls to you. But this land," he gestured vaguely, encompassing not just the house but the entire ranch beyond. "This land spoke to me from the moment I saw it." There was such passion in his voice that Clara found herself momentarily speechless. This was the real Samuel Steele. She realized not the hard-bitten rancher of reputation, but a man of deep feeling and genuine vision. After dessert, Samuel suggested they move to the sitting room, where a fire crackled in the hearth, warding off the autumn chill. Clara settled into a comfortable armchair while Samuel poured them each a small glass of brandy. "To recovery," he toasted, raising his glass. "To recovery," Clara echoed, sipping the amber liquid and feeling its warmth spread through her. They talked late into the evening, the conversation growing increasingly personal as the hours passed. Clara found herself telling Samuel about her struggles in medical school, the professors who had tried to discourage her, the male students who had refused to work with her. Samuel, in turn, shared stories of his early days on the ranch, the harsh winters, the cattle thieves, the loneliness of being the only settler for 50 miles in any direction. "It must have been terribly isolating," Clara observed. "It was," Samuel agreed. "Still is sometimes. Don't misunderstand, I chose this life and I don't regret it. But there are moments, especially in winter when the snow cuts us off for weeks at a time, when I wonder what it would be like to have someone to share it with. Someone who sees the beauty in this place the way I do." His eyes met hers across the space between their chairs, and Clara felt a jolt of recognition. This was dangerous territory. She was here temporarily, as a doctor responding to an emergency. Whatever she might be beginning to feel for Samuel Steele, it shouldn't go any further. "I should probably retire," she said, setting down her empty glass. "It's been a wonderful evening, but tomorrow will bring its own demands." Samuel nodded, rising to his feet as she stood. Of course. Thank you for joining me. It's been refreshing to have conversation that doesn't revolve around cattle prices or range disputes. He walked her to the foot of the stairs, where they paused, suddenly awkward with each other. Clara extended her hand formally, trying to re-establish professional distance. "Good night, Samuel." He took her hand, but instead of shaking it, he raised it to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "Good night, Clara." The simple gesture sent a tremor through her that had nothing to do with professional courtesy. Clara withdrew her hand and hurried up the stairs, acutely aware of Samuel watching her go. In her room, she leaned against the closed door, heart pounding unnaturally fast. This was not part of her plan. She had come to Silvercreek Ranch to treat an epidemic, not to develop feelings for its owner. Once the last patients were fully recovered, she would return to Madisonville and her practice. That was the arrangement. That was what made sense. But as she prepared for bed, Clara couldn't help but remember the look in Samuel's eyes when he spoke of wanting someone to share his life and his land. Someone who saw its beauty as he did. And the truth was, she did see it. The majesty of the landscape, the satisfaction of building something lasting, the community of the ranch with its loyal workers and sense of shared purpose. It called to something in her that the small, sometimes petty world of Madisonville never had. "Don't be ridiculous," she told herself firmly as she climbed into bed. "You've known the man for 2 weeks. You have a practice waiting for you, patients who depend on you." But as she drifted off to sleep, it was Samuel's face she saw, not the stern rancher of their first meeting, but the man who had sat across from her in the firelight, sharing his dreams and listening to hers with genuine interest. The next morning brought a return to routine. Clara checked on her remaining patients, pleased to find them all significantly improved. At this rate, they would be fully recovered within another week, which meant her time at Silvercreek Ranch was coming to an end. The thought brought an unexpected pang that Clara tried to ignore as she made her rounds, checked bandages, and administered medications. She was so focused on her tasks that she didn't notice Samuel's absence until mid-morning. "Where's Mr. Steele today?" she asked Emmett casually as they changed the bedding for one of the patients. "Rode out at dawn," Emmett replied. "Said he had business in town. Probably won't be back until tomorrow." Clara told herself the sinking feeling in her stomach was merely disappointment at losing a capable assistant for the day, not anything more personal. She threw herself into her work with renewed vigor, even helping Mrs. Fletcher with some baking in the afternoon when her medical duties were complete. Samuel returned the following evening, bringing with him mail that had accumulated for Clara in Madisonville and had been forwarded to the nearest post office. There were several letters from patients, a medical journal she subscribed to, and a formal-looking envelope from the town council. "Thank you for thinking to collect these," Clara said as he handed her the small bundle. They were standing in the hallway of the main house, having just finished checking on the last patient together. "Of course," Samuel replied. "I know how important it is to stay connected to your practice." There was something in his tone, a hint of reserve that hadn't been there before their dinner together, that caught Clara's attention. "Is everything all right? You seem distant." Samuel ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she had come to recognize as a sign of inner conflict. "I've been doing some thinking. The men are recovering well. You'll be able to return to Madisonville soon, as we agreed." "Yes," Clara said slowly. "Probably within the week, if their progress continues." "That's good news," Samuel said, but his expression didn't match his words. He hesitated, then added, "I should let you rest. It's been a long day." Before Clara could respond, he had turned and walked away, leaving her standing alone in the hallway with her mail clutched to her chest and a confusing mix of emotions churning inside her. In her room, Clara opened her letters, saving the one from the town council for last. When she finally broke the seal and unfolded the single sheet of paper, she found herself staring at the words in disbelief. The council, it seemed, had taken advantage of her absence to reconsider her position as town physician. While they appreciated her emergency services over the past year, they had decided to offer the permanent position to a Dr. Harold Wilson, recently arrived from Chicago. Dr. Wilson, the letter explained, had extensive experience and, being a family man with a wife and children, would provide a more suitable and stable presence in the community. Clara read the letter twice, anger building within her with each word. They had used her absence, her response to a medical emergency, as an opportunity to replace her with a man. Despite her year of service, despite the lives she had saved, despite the respect she had fought so hard to earn, all undone because she was a woman who had dared to practice medicine. She was still sitting with the letter in her hands when a knock came at her door. Hastily wiping away tears she hadn't realized were falling, Clara called, "Who is it?" "It's Samuel," came the reply. "May I speak with you for a moment?" Clara considered refusing, not wanting him to see her in such a vulnerable state. But something in his voice, an urgency that matched her own churning emotions, made her rise and open the door. Samuel stood in the hallway, still in his travel clothes, his expression uncharacteristically uncertain. "I'm sorry to disturb you so late, but I needed to," he broke off, noticing her reddened eyes. "Clara, what's wrong?" Without meaning to, she found herself holding out the letter. "The Madisonville Town Council has replaced me. While I was here saving lives, they gave my position to a man." Samuel scanned the letter quickly, his jaw tightening as he read. "This is outrageous. After everything you've done for that community." "Apparently being female outweighs any medical skill or dedication I might possess," Clara said bitterly. "I suppose I should be grateful they waited until I was gone to make it official. Saved me the public humiliation, at least." "What will you do?" Samuel asked, returning the letter. Clara shook her head. "I don't know. Find another town in need of a doctor, I suppose. Start over again." The prospect was exhausting to contemplate, the struggle to prove herself, to build a practice, to earn trust, all beginning from scratch. "Or," Samuel said, his voice suddenly hesitant, "you could stay here." Clara looked up sharply. "What?" "Stay here, at Silvercreek Ranch." Samuel took a deep breath, as if gathering courage. "That's actually why I came to talk to you tonight. I've been thinking about this since our dinner together. The ranch needs a doctor, a permanent one. The nearest town is a full day's ride away, and as we've seen, emergencies don't wait for convenient timing." "You want me to be the ranch physician?" Clara asked, trying to make sense of his proposal. "Yes. No." Samuel ran his hand through his hair again. "I mean, yes, we need a physician, but that's not why I'm asking you to stay. I'm asking because I don't want you to leave." The simple honesty of this statement left Clara momentarily speechless. Samuel continued, the words coming more rapidly now. "I know we've only known each other for a short time. I know this is sudden and probably inappropriate. But there's something between us, Clara. Something I haven't felt before with anyone else. When I'm with you, everything is clearer, brighter somehow. I find myself wanting to share things with you, things I've never wanted to share with another soul." "Samuel," Clara began, but he held up a hand. "Please, let me finish before I lose my nerve. I'm not asking for any promises. I'm just asking for time. Time for us to get to know each other better. Time to see if what I'm feeling, what I hope you're feeling too, is real and lasting." Clara felt her heart pounding in her chest. "And if it isn't? If we discover we're not compatible after all? Then you'll have had time to establish yourself as the physician for this entire area, not just the ranch. There are smaller homesteads, other ranches nearby. You could build a practice here, independent of any personal relationship between us. Samuel's eyes held hers steadily. I won't pretend I wouldn't be disappointed, but I would never stand in the way of your career or your independence. Those qualities are part of what I admire about you. The near confession hung in the air between them. Clara found herself at a crossroads she hadn't anticipated. The safe choice would be to decline, to stick to her original plan, to find another town and rebuild her practice. But the safe choice had never been what drove her. I need time to think about this, she said finally. Samuel nodded, disappointment flashing briefly in his eyes before he masked it. Of course, it's a significant decision. He stepped back. Good night, Clara. Good night, Samuel. After he left, Clara sat on the edge of her bed, the letter from Madisonville still clutched in her hand. Perhaps it was a sign, the closing of one door just as another opened before her. Or perhaps it was simply a coincidence, the two events happening simultaneously but without connection. She thought about Samuel, his strength, his dedication to his men, his vision for his land. She thought about the way he had worked alongside her during the epidemic, never questioning her authority as a physician, supporting her decisions even when they went against conventional wisdom. She thought about the moment by the fire when he had spoken of wanting someone to share his life, and the look in his eyes when he had kissed her hand. And she thought about Silvercreek Ranch, its vast beauty, its potential as a community in need of medical care. The life she might build here, not as an outsider fighting for acceptance, but as an integral part of something growing and vital. Morning found Clara still weighing her options, turning them over in her mind as she checked on her patients. To her surprise, all three were well enough to be discharged from the infirmary, though she cautioned them to continue resting and building their strength. Looks like our epidemic is officially over, Emmett remarked as they watched the last patient walk slowly but steadily back to the regular bunkhouse. Thanks to you, Document. It was a team effort, Clara replied automatically, but her mind was elsewhere. With the epidemic contained and her patients recovered, there was no medical reason for her to remain at Silvercreek Ranch. The decision she had been postponing could no longer be delayed. She found Samuel in his study, reviewing ledgers with a furrowed brow. He looked up as she entered, his expression instantly alert. Clara, is everything all right with the men? They're all discharged from the infirmary, she replied. The epidemic is contained. Your ranch is healthy again. That's wonderful news. He set down his pen. I can't thank you enough for what you've done. You already have, Clara said. Many times over. A silence fell between them, heavy with unspoken questions. Finally, Samuel broke it. I suppose this means you'll be making arrangements to leave. Actually, Clara said, her heart suddenly racing, I've been thinking about your proposal. Samuel's expression gave nothing away, but she noticed how still he had become, how intently he was watching her. I've decided to accept, she continued, not as a permanent arrangement, but as an experiment. I'll stay for 6 months. That will give us time to see if what's between us is real. And it will give me time to assess whether there's truly a need for a physician in this area beyond the ranch itself. The smile that broke across Samuel's face was like sunrise after a long night. 6 months, he repeated. I can work with that. I have conditions, Clara warned, though she couldn't help smiling in return. I'll need a proper examination room set up, and I'll need to be able to travel to neighboring ranches and homesteads if called. I won't be just Silvercreek Ranch's doctor. I want to serve the whole area. Absolutely, Samuel agreed immediately. We can convert the small cabin near the creek into a clinic. It's centrally located, easily accessible from multiple directions. I'll have the men start work on it immediately. His enthusiasm was infectious, and Clara found herself caught up in planning where to order medical supplies, how to announce her services to the surrounding area, what equipment would be essential versus merely convenient. "There's one more thing," she said as their discussion wound down. "About us. I think we should proceed slowly. Get to know each other better before making any declarations." Samuel nodded, his expression serious but his eyes warm. "I agree completely. No pressure, no expectations beyond what develops naturally between us." He hesitated, then added, "Though I hope you'll continue to join me for dinner occasionally." Mrs. Fletcher was quite put out that we only used the good china once. Clara laughed, feeling lighter than she had in days. "I think that can be arranged." The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity. Samuel was true to his word, having the men convert the creek cabin into a functional clinic with an examination room, a small dispensary for medications, and a comfortable waiting area. Clara rode with him to neighboring ranches and homesteads, introducing herself as the new physician for the area and explaining her services. To her surprise and gratification, she was welcomed with enthusiasm. The nearest doctor had previously been a full day's journey away, making medical care all but inaccessible for routine matters. The prospect of having a physician within calling distance was met with universal approval, and if anyone had reservations about her gender, they kept them to themselves. By the time winter settled in properly, Clara had established a small but growing practice. She treated everything from common colds to broken bones, delivered a baby at a homestead 10 miles east of Silvercreek, and performed minor surgery on a cowhand who had been gored by a bull. Word of her skill spread, bringing patients from increasingly distant locations. Through it all, her relationship with Samuel developed gradually, as they had agreed. They dined together several evenings a week, sometimes formally in the dining room, sometimes more casually in the kitchen with Mrs. Fletcher and Emmett. They rode out together when weather permitted, Samuel showing her hidden corners of the ranch, a secluded waterfall, a stand of ancient pine trees, a rocky outcropping that offered views all the way to the distant mountains. Clara found herself drawn not just to the land but to the man himself, to his quiet strength, his unwavering principles, his vision for the future. She discovered he was well-read despite his claims of having no aptitude for books, that he composed poetry in his head while riding the range, though he refused to recite any of it, claiming it was too awful for human ears, and that he had a surprising talent for sketching landscapes. For his part, Samuel seemed genuinely fascinated by her medical knowledge, often asking questions about treatments or conditions, sometimes reading her medical journals when she was finished with them. He respected her independence, never questioning when she rode out alone to attend a patient, simply ensuring she had a good horse and proper supplies for whatever emergency might arise. The winter of 1878-1879 proved to be particularly harsh, with heavy snowfalls and bitter temperatures that isolated the ranch for weeks at a time. During one such period, with the trails impassable and the world beyond Silvercreek blanketed in white, Clara found herself sitting with Samuel in the study late into the evening, a chessboard between them. "Checkmate," she declared, moving her queen into position. Samuel groaned, studying the board as if hoping to find an escape he had overlooked. "That's 3 games in a row. I should know better than to play against a mind trained in medical school." Clara laughed, reaching to reset the pieces. "Medical school teaches diagnosis, not chess strategy. You're simply too aggressive with your knights. A character flaw that extends beyond chess, I'm afraid," Samuel admitted with a self-deprecating smile. "My father always said I charged ahead without sufficient planning." "Your father again," Clara observed, noting how frequently Samuel had mentioned the man in recent conversations. "You speak of him more often now than when I first arrived." Samuel was silent for a moment, contemplating a chess piece he turned between his fingers. "I've been thinking about him lately, about whether he would approve of what I've built here. From everything you've told me, It sounds like he was a difficult man to please, Clara said carefully. He was. But he was also brilliant in his way, dedicated to medicine, to helping people. Samuel set the chess piece down with deliberate care. I think he would like you, approve of you, even though I'm a female physician, especially because you're a female physician. He believed in competence above all else. He would have recognized yours immediately. Samuel's eyes met hers across the chessboard. Just as I did. Something in his gaze made Clara's breath catch. They had been careful with each other over these months, maintaining a certain distance even as they grew closer in other ways. But in that moment, the distance seemed to vanish, leaving only the truth of what had been developing between them all along. Samuel, she began, not entirely sure what she wanted to say but needing to say something. I'm in love with you, he said simply, the words falling into the quiet room like stones into still water. I think I have been since that first night when you arrived exhausted from your journey and still insisted on seeing the patients immediately. I tried to be patient, to give you the time we agreed upon. But tonight, sitting here with you, I find I can't keep the words inside any longer. Clara stared at him, her heart pounding so loudly she was certain he must hear it. You don't need to say anything, Samuel assured her quickly. I'm not asking for a response or a declaration in return. I just needed you to know. But Clara found that she did need to say something, that the words were there. Had been there perhaps since that dinner by candlelight when she had glimpsed the man behind the rancher's stern exterior. I love you too, she said quietly. It wasn't what I expected when I came here. It wasn't what I was looking for at all. But somehow, between treating patients and getting to know this land, getting to know you, it happened anyway. The smile that transformed Samuel's face was worth any uncertainty, any risk she might be taking. He rose from his chair, circling the small table between them, and knelt beside her seat, taking her hands in his. Clara Gallagher, he said, his voice steady despite the emotion evident in his eyes. Would you consider making your stay at Silvercreek Ranch permanent? Not just as our physician, but as my wife, as my partner in building something lasting here. The proposal was not unexpected, not after the declarations they had just exchanged. Yet Clara found herself momentarily overwhelmed by the magnitude of what he was offering, not just marriage, but a true partnership, a shared vision, a life built together on this land they both had come to love. Yes, she said, the single word carrying the weight of every hope and dream she had ever held. Yes, I will marry you, Samuel Steele. He kissed her then, a gentle kiss that deepened as she responded, her hands coming up to frame his face. When they finally parted, Samuel rested his forehead against hers, his breath warm on her skin. I should warn you, he said softly, that ranching life isn't always easy. There will be hard years, droughts, winters like this one where we're cut off from the outside world for weeks at a time. I know, Clara replied. Just as you should know that being a doctor's wife means interrupted dinners, midnight call-outs for emergencies, and occasionally having your home invaded by patients too ill to come to the clinic. Samuel laughed, the sound rich and warm in the quiet room. I think we can manage those challenges together, don't you? Together, Clara agreed. I like the sound of that. They were married in the spring of 1879, when the snows had melted and the land was coming alive with new growth. The ceremony was held at Silvercreek Ranch with Mrs. Fletcher, Emmett, and all the ranch hands in attendance, along with neighbors from surrounding homesteads and ranches. Clara wore a simple dress of ivory silk with lace at the collar and cuffs, and carried a bouquet of wildflowers gathered that morning from the meadow near the creek. Samuel, standing tall and proud beside the minister they had brought in from the nearest town, looked at Clara as if she were the most precious thing he had ever beheld. When they exchanged their vows, his voice was steady and sure, his eyes never leaving hers. The celebration afterward was a true Western affair, with a feast prepared under Mrs. Fletcher's direction. Music provided by several ranch hands who proved surprisingly talented with fiddle and guitar, and dancing that continued well into the night. Clara found herself passed from partner to partner as each man claimed a dance with the doc, who was now officially their boss's wife. But it was the final dance of the evening that remained clearest in her memory, Samuel holding her close as the music slowed, the two of them moving together under the stars, the sounds of celebration fading as they stepped away from the gathering and toward their shared future. "Happy, Mrs. Steele?" Samuel murmured against her hair. "Very, Mr. Steele," Clara replied, leaning back to look into his face. "Though I think professionally I'll continue using Dr. Gallagher. Less confusing for the patients." "Whatever you prefer," Samuel agreed easily. "As long as you're here with me, the name doesn't matter." And she was there, with him, building a life that neither of them could have imagined when Clara had first arrived at Silvercreek Ranch during that desperate autumn of Epidemic. Together they expanded both the ranch and Clara's medical practice, eventually establishing a small but proper hospital to serve the growing communities in the area. They had children, 2 sons and a daughter who grew up with the unique perspective of a father who taught them ranching and a mother who taught them medicine. All 3 inherited their parents' commitment to the land and to the people who lived on it, ensuring that the legacy Samuel and Clara built would continue for generations. Years later, when Samuel's hair had turned silver and Clara's auburn was streaked with gray, they still sometimes rode out together to watch the sunset from that rocky outcropping that offered views to the distant mountains. On one such evening, as the sky blazed with color and the first stars appeared in the darkening east, Samuel took Clara's hand, his fingers still strong despite the years of hard work. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked, a question he had never posed before in all their years together. "Staying here? Choosing this life with me instead of returning to a town where you might have had a more conventional medical career?" Clara looked at him, this man she had loved for decades, and then out at the land that had become as much a part of her as her own heartbeat. "Never," she said with absolute conviction. "Not for a single moment." And as they rode back to the ranch, to the home they had built together, Clara reflected on the strange workings of fate that had brought her to Silvercreek Ranch during that long-ago epidemic. Samuel had never technically prevented her from leaving, as the rumors had once suggested he might. He had simply offered her a reason to stay, a reason that had proven more compelling, more enduring, and more fulfilling than anything she could have imagined for herself. The cowboy had never let her leave because, in the end, leaving was the last thing she had wanted to do.